Hey guys, welcome to the CoLab podcast. It's Ryan Macpherson, CEO and co-founder at Coassemble, talking to Bo from Vault Athletics. Such an exciting podcast today to bring you. Going to have a chat all things fitness, training, physiology, and online training all in one. Bo, welcome. How you going?
Good. Thanks, Ryan. Happy to be here.
Cool. Bo, tell us a little bit about yourself and also Vault. I've been doing a little bit of research. This podcast very close to home, myself being an ex-trainer and also, into the sporting arena and fitness arena. I'm keen to hear, what does Vault do? What do you play a part in at Vault? What is exciting about Vault at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say, let's start with Vault because that's probably more exciting. So we are a sport performance and fitness software company. We take the expertise of certified strength coaches, fitness educators, and deliver training to individuals, teams, groups of people throughout the world, whether you are a high school, maybe a tennis coach, or you are in the military and you need to prepare for a physical fitness test. We try to serve all of those different populations who might not have access to safe, quality training, and deliver it in a way that's accessible for everybody just through a computer or mobile app.
So what I love about this brand, and I did a lot of research before coming on, is you're really an educational application, really. So you're providing education through technology, doing so at a really scalable way. But you're really empowering a lot of individuals who are either professional or not professional in how to get the best information around exercise physiology and training and in the whole fitness game. So how does that come about? How does Vault Athletics really start? How does it get where we are today?
Yeah, so it all started with understanding that not everybody has equal access to these types of resources, and there's a real consequence to not preparing for sport or not preparing for your job. If you have a job that has physical demands, there's a serious consequence, and a lot of time that's injury. And injury is not only physical, right? It's emotional, it's cognitive, and we know that, the high profile teams and schools and organizations, they have full strength conditioning staffs, a lot of professionals and sport performance teams, but your rural high school or secondary school might not know what they're doing. And those athletes, we think that all those athletes and individuals deserve access to safe training and development.
Yeah, so, such a cool concept.
Yeah. And started out our co-founders, Dan and Trevor, who I'll refer to them by their first names. Dan has a background in strength conditioning and sport, so he was a college football player, and then coached football and was a strength coach as well. And after he was done kind of coaching in the collegiate setting, he moved back to the Seattle area where we're based, and he was doing a lot of private training with teams and individuals. And he was living with Trevor, who was one of his best buds, and they're roommates at the time. And Trevor was doing IT consulting for some brands in the area.
It's a nice blend.
Yeah. And Trevor was noticing that Dan was coming back after coaching all day long, coming back, sitting at the table on his computer and just programming away. And he didn't have time for anything else. And he was limiting the number of people he could help by just time.
Scalability.
Yeah. And so Trevor's like, here, let me help you with this. They realized that they actually had something there that they could expand with. And that's kind of what started it all.
Yeah, cool. And tell us about your role at Vault Athletics. What does your day-to-day look like? What do you do for Vault? And, what drives your passion for being involved with such a cool company?
Yeah, well, I always knew that I wanted to, once I was done being an athlete, I knew that I wanted to help other athletes. I knew that I wanted to help athletes improve the way that athletes experience sport. And the way that I could do that is through the proper preparation. And so that's really why I joined Volt. I saw this opportunity to really do something on a very large scale and affect a lot of people in a positive way. What I do now at Volt is I'm the head of customer success. And so
such an important role.
Yeah. And it's evolved over time, right? Like I joined Volt as doing half my time was spent doing sales and half my time was spent doing exercise science research. And we didn't have a customer success or support team or anything like that.
Oh, I've been there. I've been there. I know the journey. We can get into some of that today. That startup journey, that scalability journey, and where you have to jump in and do many things in the business just to make it move to the right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my role has definitely evolved, but now I kind of own the onboarding side of the coin for our customers, continuing education content, working really closely with our marketing team. Actually, we're in the middle of a website redesign as we speak right now. And so that was a really big project that I was involved in, making sure that at the very beginning of engaging with a potential customer, we start the education process right away. And then I work with the sales team.
Before you continue, I mean, I absolutely love hearing about this. I mean, one of our passions here at Coassemble is that, it's not just education for team members, it's education for customers, right? And customers can get a great value out of online experiences that really drive their engagement in the app, or their understanding of what that business does, or, really drives their performance almost on a daily basis. And I think in 2020, we saw a lot of businesses start to understand the power of true education in sales, in revenue growth, in engagement, and, customer retention, and all the sorts of things that predominantly we've all done manually by helping customers out or answering their questions. It's now starting to feel like businesses are really starting to invest in what we call kind of, driving experience through online education. So in educational experiences. So glad to hear you kind of say, hey, right from the start, our website through to the app experience, right through to the customer support experience, it's driven by us trying to drive a better understanding by our customers. And I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I totally agree. I think for us, it really comes down to setting the right expectations up front, and then being able to help our customers reach those expectations and deliver on our promises. And that starts from the very beginning. Because if you wait until after the sale, or then you have the situation on your hands where it's like, okay, we might have to undo what we've already done so far.
Bad habits.
For sure.
And so it sounds like you're really thinking about the customer journey, thinking about that life cycle. And we all know that obviously in any business, retention is key, right? So if you want to get a customer in the door, you want to retain them because they cost a lot of money to get them. You don't want to be losing them due to the experience they're having, or the fact that you can't stretch their experience. So it sounds like you guys are really thinking about that customer journey from day one right through to, and one of the terms that I'll pick up, you said, is further education, or even taking them further on what they had on day one, for example. So it sounds like that's really instilled. Is that coming from the founders, I'm keen, or is it something you started yourself? Where does this kind of love of educating and making sure that everyone has access to this information come from?
Yeah, I think it really relates closely to coaching.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And you have Dan, who one of our co-founders and our CEO, who is a former coach, current coach as well.
In the DNA.
And we employ experts within our team who have the credentials, who have coaching experience. And so I think that kind of background just kind of permeates throughout what we do. And we've also learned the hard way, like where there's been times where we haven't done that very well. Yeah. And, we are struggling to keep our customers at a certain point. And it's like, okay, well, did we really engage with them? What kind of promises were we making up front? And so we're not immune to that, but I think that educator or that coaching background really is pretty core to what we do.
Yeah, and I love that. And as an educator myself, and obviously being a coach of many teams, probably never won too many games with my coaching capabilities. But I think at Coassemble, we have a very similar mandate, almost a coaching and mentoring mandate from our leaders and our team. So where it's like, there is more to be had here. There's more experience that you can gain. There's better opportunities. Let's coach and mentor you through that. And let's never stop that journey of learning, right? And it sounds like at Volt Athletics, you've definitely got this vision of never stopping the learning journey and making sure that your customers are continually being driven by the information that you provide. I'm keen to know, obviously in the world hold of kind of exercise physiology, there's a lot of information out there, right? So you can Google it, you can kind of find it everywhere. You find it on Instagram, you know, how to get six pack, you know, by whatever. And as you say, a lot of it's got to be terribly dodgy. And as you know, as a personal trainer, trained many years ago, 20 years ago, I'm completely out of date now. So if I was to kind of walk in and start training someone today, it'd be irresponsible in my mind. So it sounds like you guys are really formalizing some of that information and making sure that the quality is there. So do you want to talk us through some of the processes, maybe in the thinking behind how you get the best information? How do you update it? How do you make sure that the people who are training off the information you're providing always have the best and most accurate pieces of information, you know, moving forward?
Yeah, I think it definitely starts with the training philosophy and methodology, and having a good understanding of that and staying true to that. Especially as we expand outside of just sport, which we might get into later, you know, because our roots are within sport and sport development, but we've found ourselves in different sectors, but we, you know, like I said, we can probably touch on that later. So it's important for us. It always will be a highly sacred value of ours to back all of our methodologies with research and best practices, industry standard best practices and principles. We're not going to change everything because a single new study came out, right? You know, like you can't just follow the newest research. You go with a lot of things. It's a balance between going with what is tested and tried and true, and then also staying aware of new research and new methodologies. And we do an awesome job with that. So we hire certified strength coaches. We have a strength and conditioning advisory board that's compiled of some of the most well-respected coaches in the industry, and everything needs to be approved by them. Right. But we also have a really tight feedback loop with our customers, right? Because like a really good program on paper means nothing if it's not implemented correctly.
On the ground, yeah. So you're getting a lot of feedback from customers saying, hey, I tried this out, and maybe if we tweaked it here, or, you know, maybe if we understood this a little bit better, we would have got a better result. Or maybe it just worked perfectly, and you know, you should let other people know that if they use this methodology in this environment with this type of athlete, I got great results, right?
Yeah. And so when we have our one-to-one conversations with our customers, that's what we want our conversations to be about. And that's why, and you know, we can dive into this more later if you want to, but like that's why Coassemble ended up being so valuable for us. Is a lot of the stuff that you might repeat during training calls over and over again with different customers. We use Coassemble so that our conversations can be more pointed and more valuable when we engage with our customers. And so,
well, I love that you brought it up. I mean, look, I wasn't going to bring up the fact that you're a Coassemble customer, and one of our favorites at the moment in terms of, you know, what you guys are doing in the space and how you're using Coassemble. We'll definitely get into that. I won't hold back on asking some questions around your deep dive into online training, or what we call kind of like educational experiences through, you know, online creation. So we'll definitely get into that. I'll definitely ask you some questions about it. I'm keen to, before we get into that, just understand a little bit further on, if, you know, I just literally this week, right? So I go through phases, you know, so I used to have a jawline. It was a long time ago. I think and dream about training all the time, right? And I want to do it. However, I'm very often very lazy, and I don't get there. But this week, you know, last week actually, sorry, I joined the gym for the first time again. Now this would be, you know, I don't know, the umpteenth time I've tried to get back into training. And, you know, I walk into the gym and I've got this background, I've got a bit of an experience, but I obviously don't know what I'm doing. Is Volt Athletics something that I can pick up, for example, or is it something more that my trainer at that gym might be really interested in? I'm just trying to understand the exact customer segments. And then I know that you guys are moving into some other segments, which is really exciting, which you mentioned before, which is kind of tactical training for, you know, fire guys, and tactical training for maybe the defense force. And I'm keen to understand, what does the customer segment look like for you guys? And then we'll deep dive into how we're using Coassemble to maybe help that segment grow.
Yeah, it's actually both the professional and the end user. If we return back to our mission, it's to provide access to safe and effective training to everybody, everywhere, to anybody. So like there's kind of two components of that, right? Like if we were to stay with just our sport teams, yeah, we have a huge impact on athletes who are part of a team. It's a really
Already.
big number of people, but then
Mhm.
there's those who are not part of a team who, who wouldn't get access to it. And so anybody, you can go in and download the app and you can start training on it. You don't have to have a coach that you get it through, but you can. Another barrier is if you are a coach, there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many clients that you can work with. So if our tool can help you scale your time, your programming, then you can work with more clients. So it's kind of both.
And tell us a bit more about this tactical side. You said you're kind of moving into that space, and I can imagine that's a very regimented space, a very compliance-based space, because you talked about injuries and some of the things that can come out, emotional and injuries. When you're not well prepared to do your job physically, and it sounds like you guys are in this exciting space where your type of application that provides knowledge and provides information out might help some of those guys or those team members kind of get ready for their day-to-day.
Yeah, well, in each of the different branches, there's different testing protocols, performance tests that are mandatory. That if you are in that branch, you have to pass those tests. Otherwise, you get put on a list and all of that. And you also have to remember there's different levels of, and there's different occupations with each of these branches. You can have somebody who 2 weeks before their PT test, their scheduled testing, that's when they start training. And now they have to try and make up this ground because they haven't been doing anything. They've gone on maybe a couple runs here and there, but they haven't been training for their test. And then you also have the special forces who have a whole different set of needs and wants and desires. So really what Volt helps us do helps the military branches do is provide training that scales for your beginner, for your person who's very low level of entry to exercise in training, but then also allow, those special forces soldiers have a dedicated team of experts. They're almost like a professional sports team in that way. So the big impact, I guess the most widespread impact is with the general force who don't have access to a ton of special privileges or resources. And we help them have a plan to pass their PT tests and maintain their readiness.
Cool. And I assume that then they pick up the tool and they start using it for other, just generally maintaining their health and well-being, maybe pass on to other friends. So my last question on the business before we dive into kind of a bit more on how Coassemble may be assisting Volt Athletics, but also how you got into kind of thinking about even using Coassemble. We'll definitely get into that and dive deep. I assume referability is a big part of your business, right? So a lot of people say, hey, I used Volt Athletics, I used the app, I had a great experience. The information on there is super solid. Is that a big part of what you guys are driving towards? This educational piece means that everyone's kind of staying current, they're feeling like they're getting great information, therefore they're sharing that with their friends, or they're sharing that with other businesses, or the word is getting out that Volt Athletics is a really trusted source of exercise physiological knowledge, and we should be getting on board.
Yeah, I think the biggest source of referrals is our credibility within the space. And people who train on Volt consistently see the results. I know it sounds cliche, right? You're going to see the results, but but you are.
Just 60 days. In just 60 days, you do it every day, you're going to see the results. No, I think the fitness industry, you're 100% right. I think there's the C word, the credibility. I think when you talk about the fitness industry, there is so much distrust sometimes. There's so much antitrust because there has been a lot of kind of one-offs. We only care about your money for the first 30 days, and then really we're going to watch you kind of put that equipment on the sidewalk for collection in a couple of months' time because we don't really care about your health and well-being. What I love about this business, and when I research, it really does feel like you guys are coming from the core values of, no, let's provide good quality information. Let's ensure that the person has what they need to succeed. And then that drives credibility, as you say, because people are actually getting results. And that credibility, I assume, drives repeat business. And then I'll segue straight into when you have that repeat business and your value is of credibility, then education becomes almost a number one USP, right? Because you're now kind of seen as that information that you're providing, the education on how to drive that information for success becomes a big USP for you guys, a unique selling proposition that allows you guys to drive growth. So let's segue. How do you find Coassemble? What are you looking for on the day that you find it? And what drives you to think about a tool like Coassemble? What's happening in the business? You're doing too many tickets. You're having repeat conversations, as you mentioned before, that you kind of want to, standardize. I'm interested. What is the day one thinking that leads you to buy the best LMS in the world, Coassemble? I mean, obviously that's a bit of a plug for us, but
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, so I was looking for, honestly, the acute problem I was trying to solve was I needed to scale my time.
Okay, perfect.
I was noticing I was having the same conversations with my customers, all different sorts of customers, and I needed to, what I wanted to do is I wanted to find a way so that I could almost guarantee that I could be really confident that every customer that comes on board, whether they talk to one of us or not, is going to have a baseline level of proficiency. And going with a course, like a getting started onboarding course, seemed to be the solution that was most obvious at the time. And then after that, I'm just interested,
you onboarding every customer yourself. So for example, I know at Coassemble, in our first 100 customers, I literally onboarded every customer. I answered their questions. I gave them my mobile phone and I'm like, look, you call me, right? I'm here. And then all of a sudden you get to where we are today with almost 4,000 customers. And, I can't give out my mobile phone to everyone across the world. But, I think that scalability piece is important. So were you doing this kind of one-on-one back then? You're in customer support. You're trying to make sure people get onboarded and get into the app in the best way. Was it just that process that was really draining and that kind of caused you to start thinking about using Coassemble?
It was, and we had tried other things too. Like we had created videos and just had like a YouTube playlist. We hadn't really formalized anything. We had done a couple different help resources built into our product in certain phases of our product in the past, but we knew we didn't want to take away the personal touch because our customer success, when you are a Volt customer and you're being onboarded, you are put in touch with a strength coach consultant, which means you are going to get somebody who is a certified strength and conditioning coach.
Yep.
And if that's me and I'm telling you here's just the buttons you need to click, well, then that's not super valuable for you. But as a customer, I get a lot of value from talking to somebody who is like my strength coach, who we try to position ourselves as extension of your coaching staff, extension of your performance team if you're not in a sports setting. No. And that's what really drives value. That's what really makes a connection for the customer. And so we wanted to still be able to do those things, but in a way that was scalable.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things that you touched on that I'd really love to dive into. So when you're thinking about using a tool like Coassemble, a lot of people kind of go, cool, I'll put it in the app, or I'll do it external, or I'll use it through my support live chat, or whatever that is. So just want to break a couple of things down. So you talked about you tried it in the application itself, but the application, I assume, is centered around using it, right? And you don't want to kind of clog that up with necessarily information that is really, really helpful while they're very focused on using the application. So that comes down to good user experience design and things like that. But you don't want to miss out on, you're trying to support these guys as an external assistant. The second point I love that you made, which is, they get connected with the person that's going to talk to them about their exercise and their physiology and all the things that they're going to, train about. You don't want that person going, hey, click here, click there. This is where you go to get your billing information and vice versa, because all of a sudden you've blended someone that is a true expert and is providing that value with someone that necessarily is just trying to give you ancillary support. And then we come to you, Bo, who's doing that ancillary support. And let's be honest, it's very important because customers get a lot of value out of knowing that they can use the application well, they can get support when they need it, they get their answers, they get their questions answered. So what we've really done is kind of isolate, where does educational value for you play a role, and it doesn't always play a role in necessarily just one place. It plays a role in somewhere else. So I love that concept. What was the first course you made? Was it an onboarding course on how to use the application, how to navigate the program? I mean, what was the first piece of information that come out of Coassemble in your vision?
Yeah, it was that onboarding course, because that was the acute problem that needed to be solved. But as I was looking into and researching learning management systems, I saw these other opportunities come up that,
Mm.
might be a midterm goal to be able to expand and deliver unique education experiences outside of our current channels like social media. Like, yeah, that's important. That's part of the strategy, but this is another lever that we can pull. And so,
Tell us about what some of those goals are. Like, what are you looking to do with Coassemble, or what have you done since that onboarding course that's really proven to add a lot of value in the customer training space?
Yeah, so we have been running the onboarding course for several months, assessing, making sure people were getting through it at the rate that we wanted them to.
Yep.
And we kind of just started with our legacy market, our coaches, our sport coaches and strength and conditioning coaches. And once that was proved out and we deemed that as being successful, then we expanded to offering military specific, sector specific, kind of replicating that same process that had been proven successful previously.
So really tailoring the information and making sure that it was contextually relevant to the segment and the buyer and the user, and making sure that they get the right information rather than just kind of going cookie cutter and saying, cool, we've got a help article on the website, everyone can go read it and answer your questions. You're really now starting to design something that's going to be, really valued because it actually makes sense in their contextual area.
Yeah, which is super important. Like if you're working with soldiers and in the onboarding course, it keeps saying athletes, that doesn't feel great. Right?
or Ryan at the local gym. Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, makes sense. So I guess from there, so, you talked about completion. That's obviously something that's really important for you. Coassemble provides some analytics. Were you seeing, are you tweaking the information you're providing? A lot of what we hear at Coassemble is that it's so easy to create content and tweak it and change it that, if you find that something's not quite working in your onboarding and there's an area that they're not necessarily getting, you can go back in and tweak it and see that completion rate go up. Is that something you're really diving into, or is it more at this point in time and just making the best onboarding courses possible?
Well, we definitely had to make some edits, and it was really easy as we had new product features that were pretty important to the overall experience of the customer. It's really easy for us to go in, and at this point in that onboarding course, it's important to introduce this new feature. So that was really important. And then
so it becomes almost like a living, breathing resource, right? So just like a help article on your website, or something in the application that is support-based, it becomes living, breathing, that you change it when you know that the platform's changing. Because again, that goes with your mandate of always providing, the most up-to-date and most, validated pieces of information to you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that matches with our product, right? Like we want to make sure that it, the timing of that is pretty sensitive, right? If you're being trained on how to use a tool, but the tool looks different because it was, something was added to it, then that's not great. So we need to make sure that the experience lines up with the actual the training materials that we're giving you.
Love that. Yeah. And so I'm curious, like once we dive a little bit deeper, so what type of content are you creating? So when I say that, I mean, you talked about videos in the past, you'd had a YouTube library. Were you able to use some of those elements and then kind of give you an extra bit through text and image and activities? I'm curious, like what does the course actually contain a lot of the time in that onboarding process?
Yeah. So as a person who was building the courses, I tried to take some inspiration from other courses that I had attended. And so what I found as a learner is that I appreciated having both. If there was video in that course, I wanted to also have the text. I wanted to also be able to read. I wanted to be able to choose between the two. I wanted to have frequent checkpoints and learning checkpoints to reinforce that I was learning the right things.
I'm heading in the right path. Yep.
Yep. I also wanted, from an experience standpoint, I wanted a really easy navigational screen at the beginning. So I know, okay, is this going to take? Yeah, is this going to take 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there 4 modules? There's 3 courses?
What's in this course? Yep.
Exactly. Because we're all strapped for time.
Busy.
And I need to know how this thing that I'm going to focus on, and that's important to me, fits into my schedule, my priority list. So those are all the things that I tried to replicate within our course. So we have video short videos in there, try and keep them very short. Also have the longer form text, and then like almost like transcripts. There's sometimes we have some differences between the video and the text, but there's both. And then the frequent checkpoints with different types of question and answer. So whether it's matching or, you know, whatever it might be, try to get different formats in there to keep it interesting.
And I think one of my questions is around your brand. For example, it's a very modern, fresh feeling brand. You've got a really well built out application. It looks and feels really user experience positive. You know, you basically design something that is easy to use, and you want your users to find the information, I assume, in the best way possible. So when you're picking a tool to get started, you know, in this process of educating your customers and making sure that they had the information on this onboarding course, how important was look and feel and brand and mobile compatibility and all the sorts of things that matched, I guess, what you guys were doing on one side? You didn't want to have, I assume, a clunky kind of old educational tool. You were probably looking for something, luckily, like us at Coassemble, which looked good, who was easy to use, navigate was pretty much anyone can jump in and find the buttons and the navigation, but also mobile compatible. As you say, people are busy. Trainers are often on their feet. They're not necessarily sitting at desktops. Was that something that was part of your process in thinking about buying a tool like us, for example?
So important. It was so important. And what was really nice when I was going through the sales process with Coassemble, I was provided with a lot of really cool materials around customer-centered learning. Here are the things that you should be paying attention to, or here's the things we recommend you pay attention to in looking for an LMS. We know we know that our customers are very much more likely to interface on a mobile device. So that was huge. Like you said, they're strapped for time, they're on the go. And you know, if they're a teacher, they don't want to get on a computer when they get home. So
makes sense.
So that was really important. Also, just having quality functionality was obviously a baseline proficiency that needed to be met. But then what really kind of put Coassemble over the top for me is it is a look and feel, and specifically just the messaging within the app. I really liked the reinforcement of, you know, the emojis and stuff. I think that connects with our audience pretty well too. Even though it sounds good.
It's really good feedback, and we have a founder, Jude here. He's a genius behind the product. I probably, I just work off his back essentially here. But essentially, he always had this colorful kind of idea around making characters in the application and making sure that the learner was catered to in a fun way, right? And not necessarily in a static PDF. Here's the PDF, please read it, and then at the end we'll give you a certificate. It needed to feel like I'd actually enjoy this process, and I think when you turn traditional e-learning tools, which is what we are, you know, traditionally training tools, LMSs, there is this almost kind of like feel of stagnation, a little bit of feeling of like, that's not going to look very good. We don't want to use that with our customers, right? And so I think we're hearing more and more stories like yours where you can really drive the ROI of your business through quality online experiences that are designed for fun and match your brand and really feel like it's a part of what you do anyway. But you're actually using a pretty traditional tool, an LMS, if that makes sense. And sometimes customers probably have no idea. They're not even aware that they're really going through a training process. They probably see it as just a really good way to get the information they need to start using your product.
Yeah, and it's reinforced by our customers, who a large majority of them are educators, right? They're a sport coach, they're a strength conditioning coach, they work in a high school, they work at a college, and so they have some familiarity with, you know, whatever their school might be using for remote learning. And so to hear the positive feedback from our customers about the learning experience, like I've only heard positive feedback about the onboarding course. About all the
I was going to circle back to that feedback part. You know, you talked about it right at the start of the podcast that, you know, you get a lot of one-on-one feedback. You get to hear the customer voice back through this opportunity. I'm keen to understand how that works. So they go through a course, or they're going through a course and they're reaching out with feedback, or they're saying, hey, great onboarding course. I'm now into the application. I'm feeling good. What's next? I'm just keen to know, how does that voice resonate with you? You're in customer support / success, I assume, where you're really trying to drive engagement in your product. The customer's voice is pivotal in that role. As we know here at Coassemble, we offer 24/7 live chat. We want to talk to our customers. We want to hear what's wrong. We want to hear what's right. We want to hear, how we can improve the process. So talk to me about how has Coassemble allowed you to get that voice back and that feedback process and that loop that you talked about earlier?
Yeah, that loop is one that is definitely, we've seen a lot of improvement internally over the past just recent couple of years. I mean, it's taken a lot of work from a bunch of different teams. And if it's all right with you, I might just share like how we've kind of started to complete that loop with different departments, and then we can talk more about like what Coassemble has done to help with that. Great. So we have our account managers who are our salespeople, and they actually own their own book of business. So when they bring a customer on board, they're going to go through an onboarding experience that's part self-paced e-learning, part one-to-one with a strength coach consultant. And then after the onboarding period, then the account manager re-engages with that customer. We have basically a trade-off or a handoff between the two. Yep. And then that account manager is checking in with the customer ongoing throughout the year. The strength coach consultant or onboarding specialist is still available to be that kind of expert, but we're engaging with our customers throughout the entire year. And every time we have those conversations, the feedback gets logged. We make a point to really ask for feedback rather than just kind of like taking it passively. We really prompt that feedback. And if there's a customer objection or anything, we try to kind of get as much insight into that as possible by asking, okay, well, you're having this issue. Like, what do you think you would like to see differently? And that actually helps spur a lot more like product ideas internally. We also have ongoing product market fit surveys that we are doing with different segments of our customers. Our customer experience team has done an awesome job of building that process out. And we zooming out, we internally as a team, we communicated as we're putting our customers first. The only way that we get better is by listening to their feedback. We still get to decide what we're going to build. But if we don't hear from them, then we risk just building the tool that we think is best rather than the tool that is actually best for the customer. So absolutely. Yeah. So what Coassemble has allowed us to do is, again, freeing up time to be able to spend with our customers and have those more pointed conversations that are more meaningful both for the customer and for us, because we can have clear objectives going into each one of those calls.
And they come in with information because they've already done, let's say, the course, and they already understand the core values, metrics, or what they need to do. And so now you're taking that conversation to another level because you're not having to repeat those core values at the start and then also have to take it to another level. So you're able to come in on the information's already been consumed and understood at a certain level, and then really build on top of that. And that is a scalable process because you can do that, at a higher level. You can add more value. You can make sure the customer's feeling like they're really getting a richer experience, but you can do that at scale.
Yeah, and it also allows us, it's just another mechanism for re-engaging with our customers who renew, right? Like you've used a service in the past and, maybe you're loyal to that brand, but you don't always stay up to date with all the new features, right? Because you've got a million other things going on. So when we renew a contract with a customer, we take them through a similar experience where they go through this course and they might see new features that they hadn't noticed previously or that they just weren't aware of. And that allows us to we still pair that up with another call or another sequence of calls to get their feedback on, hey, does this feature actually work for you? Oh yeah, I'm so glad that you added it. I know I've been asking for it for a while. I really appreciate that you guys listen to us. Like, those are the conversations that are more fun to have and that we get to have more often.
Yeah, and renewal is it all comes back to customer retention, right? We want to make sure that our customers are feeling the love, that they feel like there's value there, but that value is added, regularly. As a subscription company ourselves, we live and die on you loving us every month enough to pay that bill at the end of the day, right? And so
Yeah.
you have to keep making that value higher and higher, and making sure that you've got really good value out of that monthly payment or that yearly payment if it's a renewal, for example. And yeah, so often you see a customer come back around for their renewal, and they might not necessarily understand exactly what you've added in the last 3 months. We see it a little bit ourselves when we maybe necessarily haven't communicated exactly what's been added in the app, or we haven't had that conversation around a new feature that might change the game for them. So loving that you're using Coassemble also to kind of get that product information, refresh that product information in your customers on a regular basis, just to ensure that they understand that you're with them in the journey, you're user focused, and you're making sure that they're really, they're valued at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's been super helpful for all of those reasons you described.
So a couple of questions just on, what have you found really challenging building out courses? You're probably new to this game. You probably got an experience in, training people, coaching people on the fitness side. You've got a sales background, which is obviously a lot of narrative sometimes, and really explaining how the value of a product resonates. But doesn't sound like you built too many courses before. It sounds like you didn't go to learning design school. You didn't go to you didn't come from the HR department. At Coassemble, we absolutely love that, because just like your mission and vision is to probably empower people to train better and to do that through information at scale, our vision is very similar. We want to ensure people can share knowledge is a scalable way, but we also want to break down those barriers of cost and time and skill level to get into this game, right? And make sure that someone like yourself, who has never done this before, can actually come in and make a big impact in their business, but do so pretty quickly and hopefully not too annoying as a process. So I'm keen to hear, as a beginner, and I'm going to call you a beginner course maker, maybe that's a little bit hard. But, how did it feel, and what were some of the challenges you may have gone through as you kind of started using Coassemble, but also just thinking about doing this, I guess? What were some of the fears maybe coming in?
Yeah, I was definitely unsure that I was gonna build a bad course. I had never done it before, and it's why I had engaged with the Coassemble customer success team so much. Is like I was pinging them for questions like, hey, can you send me materials on this? What should I be looking out for with this? So. But I also just got the sense going through the sales process, playing with the tool, going through a couple courses as a learner as well.
As a learner, yeah.
I had the sense, and I built up some confidence that I was going to be able to do this. And because Coassemble is really easy to use, and it's really, I don't want to use I don't want to be too, I don't want to use too many buzzwords, but it's simple and efficient.
Yeah. We like to say simple but powerful, right? So you can deliver a really powerful punch, but at the end of the day, you can sit down in 30 minutes and probably get started on a pretty good pretty good course. If you've got the vision and the idea behind what you want to build, then we've probably got the technology to enable that. Yeah.
And so I think a big thing for me that helped me avoid some problems is understanding what my expectations were going to be with building the first onboarding course. So the onboarding course that I built initially was 35 minutes long. And I didn't expect everybody to get through all of that in one sitting. So I had to kind of go through okay, so if somebody's only going to sit down once and they're not going to come back to this, what do they need to get through? Exactly. And so having that understanding was really big. It's probably saved me a lot of headaches if I wouldn't have realized that initially. And that was something that had come up in my conversations with the team. I would say another one of the challenges is, even though, Coassemble makes it really easy to build quickly and to build quality courses, I still think, and this is something that everybody's probably gonna encounter, is just having the time and making the time to do that, and knowing how many different iterations of a course you might need to make, what adjustments to make.
As the content changes and the needs change for the audience, for example, you do end up having a couple of courses that are needed.
Yeah. And I am still, fairly new. I think you are right to still categorize me as a beginner course builder. because
Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like you've already progressed to expert level. I mean, you've got people going through onboarding courses. You're starting to contextually change those courses, and you've been able to probably impact the business. I want to start there for a second and ask a couple quick questions on the impact for the business. We often say, training or education, it can be hard to measure, right? So, we try and sell a tool, and we say to businesses, hey, you know what? Use our tool. You're going to have an impact in your business. And they say, cool, what's the percentage change? And we go, good question. Like, is Barry going to know more at the end of the day? Yeah, we think so. Is Barry going to have a better experience because of going through, this experience? Yeah. But how do we measure that? How do we make sure that this tool is paying for itself, and your time that you're investing, I guess, in making these courses and making sure that the onboarding course is successful? How do you guys measure whether this kind of strategy, I guess, is working for you guys? I'd love to know if there's an internal measure, that the way that you guys talk about it. Is there a value put to it and said, hey, you know what, we've been able to see X completion of the onboarding course, those customers stay longer, or they have better 5-star ratings because we've been able to kind of get them onboarded in a better way? I'm just curious to know, if you are measuring this in some way, what does that look like for Vault Training?
Yeah, so externally, looking at like external KPIs, the things that Coassemble tells us that I use to justify purchasing the tool and subscribing to the tool is number of learners that are going through at any segment of time.
Yep.
The time that learners spend. So like and that's important because we would still view Coassemble as being part of our product because it's part of our service. So we count that time in Coassemble as time with our brand. So that has a value.
That makes a lot of sense. And a great point. I think one that I'll take to my team and steal off you. Brilliant.
Yeah. And then internally, the most obvious one is the time saved. In the 6 months prior to, and I know this because I just wrote up a report on it. Awesome. The 6 months prior to using Coassemble compared to the last 6 months where we have been using it. My time spent onboarding customers, our time onboarding customers has been reduced by 41%.
Oh, amazing. Well, there you go. You've got the stat that I was looking for. Amazing. It's very rare for businesses to really look at this. And so I'm so happy to hear that you're really diving in and saying, hey, if we're going to use customer education and it's going to be a part of our product and it's going to drive value, then let's figure out a way to measure it, right? Let's figure out a way that actually says, cool. And that part that you mentioned, I think so insightful and so powerful, which is, hey, the time that they're spent engaging in information around our product is time they're spending with our product, right? And I think that's such a valuable message for anyone considering, even thinking about doing this for their business. My last couple of questions, and probably we'll get to some fun stuff because this has been a pretty serious podcast so far where I've really grilled you, so I apologize. But
no, I'm having fun.
You're having fun? Okay, well that's okay then. I can see you drinking a lot of water, and I'm thinking about how many waters I have in a day, and I'm already thinking I need your app because I haven't got a water on my table. I've got like 16 coffee cups or something.
Yeah, like that. I gotta balance out all the caffeine. I gotta have enough coffee to like balance myself out, or enough water.
If you were talking to our listeners and you were to say, hey, you're considering customer training, you're thinking about customer empowerment, customer knowledge sharing, making sure that they, integrate the knowledge that they're getting with your product, what would you say to people that, why should they start? What are the things that you found are really, really valuable in this process?
Well, I think first you have to really understand the problem you're trying to solve and the opportunities that Coassemble will unlock, or a learning management system will unlock.
Any tool, any learning tool.
Yeah. So I had a very clear problem that I needed to solve. I didn't want to spend my time just on the phone telling people what buttons to press.
Yeah,
that was a very acute problem that I knew we could solve with Coassemble. But I also had these other kind of opportunities that arose as I was going through the buying process. Opportunities that I haven't even been able to cash in on yet because I just know it's just going to take some time. Yep. But yeah, I think that's really important. Not just getting it to get
know what you're trying to solve, basically. So if education is going to play a role in your business and it's going to basically drive performance or ROI or revenue or support or whatever it is, know what you're trying to solve with that first course. I love that because often we have so many people we're a wide variety tool, right? So we have schools users, we have businesses users, we have big conglomerates users, we have small cafes that use us, we have Volt Athletics using us. I mean, you've got so many different brands and user cases that come to us. And often when I was in sales, which is a long time ago, and I'm a bit old hat now, so we've got other team members that are much better than me. But the first question I always used to ask was, what's your first course? What are we here to do? Because if we can just narrow in on that first iteration process of understanding what that educational value will bring to your customers, if we just start there, for example, I guarantee you that Coassemble's got a million opportunities behind it, and we can do some cool stuff. But let's just start exactly where the biggest problem is that you feel like a tool like us could help you get started. And so we see thousands of people come with all sorts of different use cases on the first day, but then 6 months later they've got 25 courses, they're doing all sorts of different stuff, and they've found the value probably a little bit wider. So was that similar to you? You really just kind of come in with one case, and now you're seeing the opportunity is much larger probably.
Yeah, I see the opportunity to expand not just not just externally, but also internally in how we use Coassemble to educate employees when they come on board. We're actually currently working on building a course about our expanded training philosophy. So I mentioned previously, we have a legacy market that's rooted in sport performance. And so a lot of our training philosophy is rooted there. And it's true, a lot of those methodologies, most of those methodologies are going to benefit general population as well. But the wants are not exactly the same when you work with athletes versus general population, right? So we have to stay true to a sound training philosophy while still meeting the wants and needs of a different population. So as we kind of have a little bit of this departure or this evolution of our training philosophy, it's important that members of our team understand what that entails. So if they're building the product, if they're on our engineering team, they have context into what they're building. If you are managing our social media account, you have context into how we're messaging safe training principles and how we're talking about training and what we're reposting and all these things. So so that's I don't know how closely that related that was to your question.
No, it's perfect. I mean, what you're saying is that the tool becomes, much richer over time because you're now able to utilize it to move the kind of internal team knowledge as well, and really kind of singularly get them driving towards one vision. I mean, I know that in Coassemble we have a customer journey, and we talk about, we want to be that rock star content creation tool that, apps like yours can, really move the needle for their customers or their internal teams. And so we talk about that vision as well, and we want to make sure that everyone's aligned to that. So that goes right down to the website. If you're creating the website pages, you're really thinking about that narrative right through to the first sales message that goes out the door from one of our, our team in sales, right through to a customer support ticket that says, hey, cool, yep, you've got questions, let's answer those with this vision in mind that you're going to try and create something amazing. So great that you've got that singular approach, and maybe Coassemble can help you align those visions. Now let's flip to some cool stuff here outside of the learning space, because you've given us a lot of information there. Very appreciative. So I know that you're a potential, you've basically been a baseballer, you've coached baseball. What's been the talk me through the toughest challenge you've had as a coach or physical coach, where maybe someone wasn't into it, maybe you had to really dive deep and give me an example of something fun that you've had to really kind of go deep on to get someone to really buy into the whole training methodology, or get behind understanding how to swing a bat, or whatever. I know that I used to train year 7s, for example. I don't know exactly what that is in the US, but maybe like the straight after primary school kind of thing. And the first time they swing a bat can be quite difficult. They're not necessarily perfectly trained, and you've got to really go through that coaching, mentoring, and get them understanding the philosophies. Give us a fun example that you've seen in your background.
Well, I think every coach looks back at what they did 5 years ago and probably shakes their head at a lot of things. Yeah. So that was the biggest thing for me, is especially when you're a young coach and you feel like you know everything.
Yeah. Because you can play the sport, right? So you can play it, therefore you know it, and therefore you should be able to pass that information on to everyone. And it could be very much backed off your own experience, right? So it's like, hey, this is how I swung a bat, so therefore I will teach you how to swing a bat this way. Whereas, adjusting it to the athlete sometimes is more important.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge was, I think when I first started coaching, when I was getting out of sport myself and then started coaching, I felt like there was always like a clear way to coach something
Mm-hmm.
or a clear
Mm-hmm.
way to develop a skill. And that's just not the case. Like everybody's going to learn differently. Everybody has their own movement solutions to different movement problems.
I love that.
And
Yeah.
so you have to adapt your approach. You have to adapt your methodology. You're not going to get it right. There's going to be a lot of trial and error, and you need to have patience, and you can't try and put everybody into the same box. And so, being able to step back. Yeah. Being able to step back and like understand that, hey, this is going to be a process. We don't need to get results. We don't need to get results in 2 weeks. Like, in fact, if you get results in 2 weeks, maybe they won't come back because they got what they wanted. So like,
and I think about that as well. Like me, and I'll give you an example. So me training in 2000, for example, as a young kind of 20-something-year-old, I'm at the gym. What I could do at the gym is very different to what the 39-year-old CEO, slightly overweight. I love that kind of thing you said, which is, there's a different movement solution for everyone, and it can look different for. I think, to be honest, if you take that approach with learning in general, and probably apply that even to, your customers and your internal team, it's probably very similar. Everyone learns differently. They need nudges at different times, and so I love that philosophy. And lastly, what were you a batter? Were you a fielder? Were you carrying the equipment? Just jokes. What was the what was the position on the field that you loved and really killed?
Yeah, so I was primarily a middle infielder, so shortstop, second base, but
in the hot zone.
Yeah. But probably no surprise that I joined a startup because I was kind of a utility player. Like I played all over the place, especially early on in my career. I was just trying to find a spot on the field. So
wanted to play, just wanted to play.
Yep. And so I was a little bit of a utility player, and it kind of translates into working at a startup and wearing a lot of different hats.
Couldn't agree more. Obviously, as a business grows, you start off, you get into a certain role, that role expands, you move out of that role, you find another one, and you're constantly building, right? And I think the athlete and coach mentality definitely suits the startup space. It's been awesome having you, Bo, on the CoLab podcast. I've loved diving deep on how Volt Athletics is really trying to drive customer engagement and retention, and also value through online educational experiences, and how you've basically been able to transform, your role in customer success, save time, and make sure that you got kind of really quality information out to your customer base through using a tool, an online training tool. And I think that's going to be a really powerful message for some of our new customers and some of the people who are thinking about getting started in this space. I've loved having you on board. I know that I will be downloading the application this afternoon as I head to the gym and try and do a couple of, bicep curls and pec decks and all that sort of stuff. As I said, 2000s is where my training was. So, I'm probably a little bit out of date. So I'll be jumping on board and having a look at what the latest and greatest information is, and hopefully go through that onboarding process. For anyone out there, check out Volt Athletics. It's a super cool app. And you've heard from Bo today that their mission and vision is really about driving your engagement through that kind of that application to drive performance and make sure that you're healthier, fitter, happier, essentially, with what you're doing in the daily fitness grind. So, Bo, thanks for coming on board. Anything you'd like to add to our listeners before we sum up today?
I really appreciate the time, Ryan. It was a fun conversation, and really appreciate everything that your team is doing. Look forward to continuing to working with you guys and create awesome resources. Let me know what you think about the app after we do a couple workouts.
Making kick-ass courses. That's what we're doing.
All right, Ryan. Hey, thanks again.